I did not say, imagine a happy kid laughing and playing with a joyful dog whose tail is wagging, everyone's happy. I didn't say that, but you still likely imagined a positive emotion in a kid playing with a dog. If I say two dogs fighting, that same thing happens. I don't have to say they're snarling and growling at each other. The images in motion creates a feeling. Putting images together in motion in the imagination creates a sense of feeling without being told what I want to create. Why is that important? If I say, imagine two angry, mean pit bulls fighting and growling aggressively at each other in a junkyard, it's way too obvious what emotions I'm trying to get out of. If it is too obvious, then in the context of a sales conversation, it will seem manipulative. Welcome, everyone, to the Close More Sales podcast. In this episode, we will explore a sales technique and a way to think about using that technique that can set you apart. And that is using motion between imagery to evoke emotion in your prospects. This is a concept that goes beyond surface level strategies and taps into how people truly make decisions, emotionally, not logically. You'll see how the right imagery and language can create an emotional connection that moves the conversation forward naturally and effectively. Mastering this approach isn't about using flowery words or relying on canned scripts. This is about learning how to ask the right type of questions and paint pictures that resonate deeply with your prospect's imagination and taps into how they make decisions. We'll focus on practical ways to engage their emotions without ever making them feel pressured or manipulated. Instead, you will learn how to guide them to their own conclusions, helping them feel confident in their decisions and excited about what comes next. Now, most salespeople miss the mark when it comes to emotional language because they either lean too heavily on facts and logic and numbers, which fails to inspire action, fails to inspire urgency, or they come across as too obvious, which raises resistance, which fails to inspire urgency and has people take action. Today, we'll break down how to strike that perfect balance. You'll learn how to craft questions and scenarios that naturally draw your prospect into seeing the value of your solution without ever feeling like they're being sold or certainly like they're being pushed. So if you are ready to elevate your conversations, make sure you're subscribed, you're tuned in, you're paying attention. By the end of this episode, you will have actionable tools to create emotional momentum in your sales process and guide prospects towards decisions that feel effortless, and most importantly, feel like their own decisions. So why listen to this anyway? What's the point of this show? The purpose of this show is to empower sales professionals and entrepreneurs to push themselves to grow, achieve unimaginable success without burning out, and ultimately transform their lives. I'm Ian Ross, and I'm obsessed with all things sales. And I work with teams across the world to make more money by asking better questions. The most proven path to achieving financial freedom is maximizing your earning potential. And a sales role is the lowest barrier with the highest possible ceiling for entry onto that path. And anyone can become a killer salesperson with the right techniques, the right mindset, and consistency in applying those two things. And everything we cover on this podcast is geared towards one thing: helping you close more sales so you can live the life that you want. So drop us a like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and leave us a review if you're listening to this podcast on another platform. And tell us what it is you got out of today's episode and the show in general, and how you will be applying what we teach. We are listening and would love your feedback and your suggestions. So if you'd like to get a sheet breaking down all the things to say that we say on a follow-up call, so you never have to utter the words, "I'm just following up" or "I'm just checking in" ever again, text "follow up," that's 2 words, "follow up" to 33777, and we'll send you a template of what to say on the phone completely for free. So first here, let's talk about understanding emotional versus intellectual language in sales. The foundation of creating emotional momentum in sales begins with understanding the difference between emotional and intellectual language. The words you choose have a direct impact on how your prospect processes the information you give them and the information they're thinking about and breaking down that is not obviously covered, right? What's happening underneath the surface. And ultimately, this determines whether they decide to take action or delay the decision. For example, when you ask, "So what do you think?" at the end of the sales conversation, you are triggering the intellectual part of the brain. And this often leads to the dreaded response, well, let me think about it, right? So many of you do this. If you ask, "What do you think?" they say, "Let me think about it." Why? Because you framed the question as a logical decision that involves thinking, which prompts the prospect to retreat into analysis mode rather than moving forward because they have emotional certainty. Contrast that approach with asking, "Do you feel like this would be beneficial to you?" Now, instead of inviting logical analysis, you've shifted the focus to an emotional response about how they feel. Decisions are made emotionally, so questions that evoke feelings of certainty, relief, excitement, are much more likely to guide your prospect toward a yes for whatever you're selling. The key here is being intentional with your language. We don't want to sort of stumble into this. We don't want to do this by accident. So early in the conversation, intellectual questions, and we'll dive into this more coming up, but intellectual questions like, "Where did you want to be in 6 months?" might be appropriate to gather context, right? To figure out in the discovery phase, moving towards the close. But as you get towards the end of the conversation, we want to be triggering emotional parts of the brain, right? So we want to ask things like, how would you be if nothing changed 6 months from now? How would you feel if everything worked out the way you wanted? The shift is in language. It challenges your prospect to visualize outcome and move from the logic part, which is how they started, into emotion, which drives their decision. This is really, really powerful. So let's get into this here and talking about a couple other concepts. The most important thing here. In advanced sales techniques, with the stuff that we cover on this show, which is pretty advanced, as I say, a lot of the time. Sometimes we cover basic and mindset process stuff, but sometimes we go pretty deep. Making sure that your prospect never feels the techniques you're doing, feels like they are being overtly manipulated, is really important. And we can do that in a way by creating motion between images in your prospect's mind. Okay, I want to talk about this here because this is really advanced stuff. So first off, if this is too advanced for you right now, that is okay. You can come back to this later. I'm not saying don't watch this. Definitely watch it. Watch it till the end and engage with the podcast. Listen to it. That's if you're gazing this via audio. But it's okay if you can't actively apply this immediately because this is an advanced training concept. So many people new to sales, or even not even new, just in sales, have much lower hanging fruit than the stuff we're going to cover on this episode. They just need to follow up more, make more dials, be more persistent, be willing to ask the tougher question, get your prospect to simply verbalize pain at all. Like there's so many lower hanging fruit for the average beginner and most salespeople in general than the stuff we're about to cover. This is the advanced stuff, okay? So this might not be what you need to work on right now, but if you are serious about using your words and having conversations in a way where the person you were talking to feels like it was their idea to take action, and you want to do this over the long haul, and you view in any way, like I do, that sales is a proxy for personal development and improvement, because as you get better at your activity and what you do, your bank account goes up. You can see that correlation pretty directly. If you feel at all like that in any way, shape, or form, it should be an inevitability that you try and get as good as possible at this. When you realize you are in that state, that you want to get as good as you possibly can be, that's when an episode like this makes sense. So to be clear, for the beginners, this is not for you because this is too advanced for you to apply. You could watch this as entertainment because it's interesting to imagine you could eventually be so good at sales that you can apply this stuff. That's fair. But for those of you who are just getting started or really struggling to get anyone across the line at all, what we are about to cover is too advanced for you to make applicable immediately. There are easier things to focus on first. I just want to plant that up there. Once you've gotten past that point, once you're already filled up with activity, once you already know how to get people to talk about their pain, once you understand a lot of the stuff we've covered on this podcast in the past, and you can do that consistently, this is when you start to look for that extra edge. If this adds an extra 5 to 10% of closings over the course of your career, that is a tremendous amount of money. But you might be able to make an adjustment right now that improves you by 25%, and that is not as advanced as what we're about to cover. But this stuff is powerful, and I'd like to train on this to understand how it works and how we can get people to think a certain way and how we can apply these techniques to communication skills in general so that you can be in pursuit of being as amazing at this as is humanly possible. So how should we think about this? How can we apply what I'm about to talk about to our sales conversations? First, let's explain a little bit more about what I mean, because I even just saying the idea that motion between images creates emotion is kind of an odd concept. So when I say motion between images creates emotion, think about it this way. When asking questions about a desired future state and or a pain to avoid, which is when we want to get them emotional, we can try and find a way to combine imagery in a way that stirs emotion. So here's a great example of this. If I tell you to think of a dog, what's happening is you imagine the image of a dog. Now, there might be different levels of emotion tied to that image of a dog depending on the individual, but it's really basic. It might be like, oh, I like dogs, or oh, I'm scared of dogs, or anything along that. But there's nothing inherently tied to that if I just say think of a dog. But if I tell you to think of a kid playing with a dog, now we have two images in motion. That invokes some type of emotion by having that action. Now, if I tell you to imagine two dogs fighting, you conceive of images in motion, and that invokes a totally different emotion. Notice here, I did not have to use emotional language in my imagery to create those emotions within you. If I say, imagine a dog, imagine a kid playing with a dog, and imagine two dogs fighting. I did not say, imagine a happy kid laughing and playing with a joyful dog whose tail is wagging, everyone's happy. I didn't say that, but you still likely imagined a positive emotion in a kid playing with a dog. If I say two dogs fighting, that same thing happens. I don't have to say they're snarling and growling at each other. The images in motion creates a feeling. Putting images together in motion, in the imagination, creates a sense of feeling without being told what I want to create. Why is that important? If I say, imagine two angry, mean pit bulls fighting and growling aggressively at each other in a junkyard, it's way too obvious what emotions I'm trying to get out of you. If it is too obvious, then in the context of a sales conversation, it will seem manipulative. When a prospect senses manipulation, which is kind of like sees through the seams of the sale, is how I think about it. They can tell you're using techniques. They can tell you're getting them to try and feel a certain way. Their guard will go up and you'll lose rapport. Many of you who are in sales know this when you walk into a certain store, car lot or something. You know techniques are being used on you, and so your guard goes up. So think, like, what is the chief emotion used to sell your product or service? Think about this. So for instance, for me, I'm selling sales training, which is a sense of aspirational knowledge. There's a gain implied in making more money. If I were to sell a luxury watch, there's an improved status in wearing a luxury watch. There's a gain. If I'm selling insurance, as I've done in the past, I've sold insurance. Insurance is the protection from the unknown, which is a pain-oriented process. If you're acquiring houses, distressed houses for cash, you're selling the convenience of certainty, which is the prevention of a pain. Okay? Remember, as I pointed this out, the chief emotional flow of a sales conversation, assuming all things are equal, is usually gain to pain to pen. Pain causes more action than gain, so I like to end on pain, but pain is the key emotion that causes someone to decide to do something right now rather than decide to do it later. Even though that might be the chief flow, we should not lose track of the underlying emotion that caused your prospect to raise their hand to want to have the conversation. Whether that is because they were cold called, you're knocking on the door, or if they responded to marketing. Understand what is the ideal flow, what is the emotion that is driving your prospects to at least be interested in talking to you. You need to know that to be able to be confident that we're creating the right type of imagery. So keep that in mind at all times. What emotion is creating that image? Whatever it is you are selling. So I'll give some examples here. For example, let's focus on that luxury watch example. If I was selling a physical good of a watch, if I want to ask a question of my prospect with a buried implicit emotional idea within it, where they can already imagine themselves enjoying the benefit of increased status with that luxury watch on I'm trying to sell, there is a right and a wrong way to do that. Well, there's multiple right and wrong ways, but there are right and wrong ways to do that, okay? And note also this question, I want to turn this into a question instead of a statement because of the advanced sales mastery. Inherent truth number 6 is the thing I train on, which is the idea it's better for the prospect to verbalize the emotions themselves in answer to a question than for us to tell them. If they verbalize it, it's more likely to be considered real than if I tell them. If I tell them, they can just not believe me. So that's why I'm turning this into a question. So what's the wrong way to implement this advanced technique? If I say, imagine if you buy this solid gold Yachtmaster, okay? And everyone's heads will turn, their jaws will drop with envy as their eyes widen with admiration because they will want to be just like you. Most prospects, certainly most prospects who can afford a gold Yachtmaster, will be able to tell what you were doing when you say something like this, right? So their guard goes up, their resistance is raised. So how can we introduce a similar idea without showing the obviousness of what we are doing? I might want to phrase this as a question. So I would say, if you buy this watch, have you ever thought about whether you actually want that level of attention? Like, not everyone I know wants heads turning to see a solid gold Yachtmaster when they walk into their college reunion. Do you understand what I'm doing there? That difference? With this language, I've also used an additional technique, which is pointing out the negative consequences of the benefit in a way that makes it more believable in your prospect's mind. This is a really powerful point because if I call it out as a negative, they're willing to engage with the reality of the benefit because it came as a negative. It was still worded as a question to give the prospect a chance to talk openly about whatever objections they might internally be harboring about buying a gold Rolex, but it's really powerful to think about this, okay? I made a negative question and painted imagery of you wearing the watch, walking into the college reunion and heads turning. That's the motion between images. You wearing the product and heads turning when you're in the setting of your college reunion to see you walk in. That is not inherently emotional. It just is implied emotion. So that motion between those images creates emotion, creates a desired state in your prospect's brain without it being overtly obvious that I'm trying to create that emotion, especially as I introduced it through a slight, like, are you sure you want this type of question? Because by calling out the negative, it seems more believable that it's happening, right? That's a really powerful point. Most of you might hear this and go, wow, that's really cool. But how do I apply that? The way to actually learn from this, since this is not our actual sales training, this is just a one-way street with the podcast, is to, if you don't want to pay for our stuff and don't want to join our training, is to do the work yourself and think, how can I apply this to what I do? I want to give value to the members of our audience who will never be willing to pay for training anyway. And the way you can get that benefit is to do the work yourself. Think, how can I apply this to what I do? What's a negative consequence of a benefit of whatever it is I'm selling? And how can I phrase that in a way where I'm not being obvious with my emotional language, but I'm creating emotion without you, like by just asking the question and putting those images together and creating motion between them, between those two separate objects, is really, really powerful because an emotion happens in your prospect's mind when you answer that question and it becomes solidified in their answering of it. On the flip side of this, if I say, imagine two dogs fighting, the motion between those images triggers a completely different emotional response. You sense tension, unease, even discomfort sometimes. You just feel it. But I didn't have to use the emotional words like you'll be happy when you walk into the reunion or the aggressive dog that's snarling and being evil, right? To create those feelings. The motion between those images did the work in the mind. This concept applies directly to sales. So think about this. We'll just talk about it. Because if you're talking about a luxury watch, Imagine owning a solid gold watch. It's a static image. It's neutral. There's no emotional weight. But with motion between the images, imagine walking into your college reunion and heads turn as your classmates notice your gold Yachtmaster. Now the prospect feels the emotions tied to status, recognition, and prestige. Okay, let's take it to other to products we were talking about earlier. Let's say we're selling life insurance. So the static image is, hey, picture owning a life insurance policy. Picture owning a life insurance policy. That's neutral. There's nothing necessarily implied there. But if I create motion between images, picture your family in mourning, discovering that you've provided them with the financial security they didn't even know was there. This can invoke a sense of comfort and peace of mind in the family discovering that by connecting these images in motion. I want to allow my prospect to feel the emotion themselves without needing to overtly state it, because overt stating of the emotion will feel like manipulation. But this keeps the conversation sounding natural and avoids triggering sales resistance. Okay, this is really, really powerful stuff.
I'm filming this video for the man himself, Mr. Ian Ross. The guy crushes. The guy's the best person in sales I've ever seen. I've invested elsewhere and I haven't got the same results. I've gone from being a seller, making 5K a month, to being a hybrid role, making 11K a month, to now be 4 months down the line from 5K to on a closing opportunity, inbound, full calendar, with the best opportunity, the best offer in my space. OTE is around 20K a month from month 2. So I've gone from 5K to 20K. If that's not a return on your investment, I don't know what is, man. If you're a salesperson and you don't invest in sales training, you're gonna get left behind because your job is to be better at sales. And sales training directly makes you more money.
My name is Lance McCann. I have recently switched sessions with Ian Ross. Those conversations with Ian has made me $50,000 in the past 2 deals that I've had. I was able to go back and renegotiate the original purchase price on one deal, and I saved $40,000, and I got another $10,000 off my other deals. Call Ian, give him a chance. You won't regret it.
If you like what you just heard and you'd like to have similar types of results, similar success, text CLOSE, CLOSE, to 33777, and we'll see if you qualify to join Advanced Sales Mastery. We are taking people from good to great.
Let's get into talking a little bit about the emotional flow in a sales conversation, because I want to make sure I cover this point too, because this came up in training not long ago. When I say the ideal emotional flow of a sales conversation can be summarized as gain to pain to pen, it's not that it needs to happen in that order. The real ideal flow of a conversation is that the marketing is so good that your prospect, by the time you're talking to them, is immediately willing to reveal all the aspects of their pain and ways to go deeper within it so that they can go to pen right away. Really, pain to pen is what matters. The ideal flow really is pain to pen. The problem is that so many people, when they start a conversation, are not comfortable revealing to a sales professional all the aspects of their pain, how that pain's been affecting them, how long it's been affecting them, how it's been affecting other people. Is there any other consequences of not fixing this pain, right? People don't want to talk that way to salespeople because they know salespeople are incentivized to figure out the ways you are emotional and need whatever it is they're offering. And they want to feel like they have autonomy, that they weren't sold and forced into a thing. So they play their cards close to their chest so they don't reveal to you how they actually feel. I like to focus on gain first, which is what the prospect wants to achieve or how things could be. Their aspirations, their goals. This taps into positive emotions like hope, excitement, ambition, things that people are comfortable answering, and then introduce pain by after I've gotten them in the mode of answering my questions. I transition to highlighting the challenges of and consequences of not acting, which helps create a sense of urgency. So loss aversion, the fear of missing out is a very powerful motivator. It is the most powerful motivator I know of. People will pay there's a lot more weight behind the idea of losing $1 than gaining $10. Okay? It's not even an even exchange. It's not just losing $1 instead of gaining $1. There is more people are willing to do to not lose $1 than gain tenfold that. This principle goes to our very core in biology because we're always afraid to lose what we already have. We can conceptualize losing what we own, what we are holding on to, whether it's an aspect of money, property, or just our identity, our aspirations, who we feel like we should be, the way things have been, right? People are afraid of that. And so we need to tap into that, the pain part of motivation, to inspire urgency to take action now. The pen is guiding them toward their own decision and using emotional certainty to drive for the close. That's a really key point. So pain to pen is the goal. I say gain to pain to pen because I'm across the most amount of conversations, I would assume even amazing marketing with qualifying situation, all that stuff, still, by the time the prospect is talking to me, they're not immediately going to want to dive into a negative pain. And so I will start with something that is easier to answer, an aspect of gain, and then is easy to transition from gain to pain for me. Because there's two ways I can do this, which is either separate questions about pain, like what is your real pain right now, right? I wouldn't ask that question, but like what is it that's really bothering you? And then another aspect, which is after they've talked about all the ways things could be great in the future in gain, I can take that away and tie that feeling of losing what they just verbalized the goal is to inaction, to indecision, to doing nothing. And so there's two levels to this, which is their actual frustrations and challenges, and also the created pain of taking away the gain they just verbalized. This is really, really powerful stuff. For the average person, when they hear this, it can seem manipulative, like you're creating a new pain that they didn't actually even have. Yeah, because they verbalize what's important to them in the future. And I need to contrast how things could be based on what they think is important, their aspirations, their goals, not mine. I didn't give this to them. They told me what they're trying to accomplish, how they would like their life to look, how they would like to be living, how much money they like to be making, where they live, what their days are like. And then I tie the lack of that to their current situation, which is exactly what they're doing right now. If you want to have that pain continue to do nothing. But we can help you with that. Like again, not everything you sell can be applied to that concept, but across a lot of situations, that's a very powerful point to understand that. So a gain-like question could be, what would achieving your goal even mean for you, right? That's a gain-oriented question. Pain, okay, what happens if nothing changes and you're still dealing with the exact same situation you're in now 6 months from now? All right, and then to go to pen, to get you to take action after I've made that pain feel real, like it's in your body right now. We can take care of X, we can take care of Y, we can take care of Z. How would that feel for you right now? Okay, this is really, really powerful. So let's break this down. The imagery we talked about before. The examples here. Imagine a dog. Neutral varies by individual. Motion between those images. Imagine a kid playing with the dog. Now you get a positive, warm. I evoke feelings of joy and nostalgia. Okay. If I do a contrasting contrasting motion between same images. Imagine two dogs fighting. Now it's negative. Now it's tense. There's discomfort. There's aggression. In the context of the language I use with the luxury watch, the basic image there is imagine a solid gold watch. Let's just say that. Imagine a solid gold watch. It's just neutral. There's no emotion there. The judgment on that varies by individual. Now I can create separate images. People are attending a college reunion. They turn to see an old classmate wearing a solid gold watch. The emotion created is very powerful. It implies status, prestige, attention, thoughts of wealth, recognition, potential discomfort, which we can call out as a negative. But for the person who could afford and is willing to pay for it, they've already dealt with that discomfort. So I can create it that way. Okay. If we're talking about life insurance, we're talking about a pain-oriented thing. Owning a life insurance policy, neutral. The judgment varies by the individual. There's nothing powerful there. Motion between separate images. Your family finds out while in mourning that there's more money to go to help to support them than they were aware of. Just the finding out that there's more money. Let's say they realize that when looking at an email come through. The emotion there, comfort applied to discomfort, implies security, peace of mind. It evokes feelings of responsibility, the alleviation of worry. If we're acquiring houses for cash at a discount, the basic image, just selling your house, right? It's neutral. The judgment on that varies from individual to individual. There's nothing inherent there. Motion between separate images. Imagine you drive away from your property, not even having to so much as glance behind you because as you're on your way to the closing company, to get handed a check for an exact amount you agreed upon. There's a certainty there in the emotion. There's a certainty regarding process, implying a peace of mind. You're having a hands-off experience. You're getting handed a check to see the aspiration. There's a convenience factor that alleviates your concern. This is really powerful stuff, okay? Figure out what images you can create motion with to create an emotion within your prospect. To implement these strategies effectively as a salesperson, you need to practice intentionality with your language and imagery. You don't want to do this by accident. Here is how you do that. Be curious. Start with questions that get your prospect talking about their goals and their challenges and their situation. Listen closely to identify emotional triggers. Listen for when they use emotional words. Create motion. Use imagery that can connect where they are now and where they want to be, or the consequences of staying stuck, right? And guide the conversation along. Avoid overly logical questions and the languages around that as you approach the close. Forget using what do you think, how will this help you with numbers? Really use emotional language to help the prospect feel certainty and excitement about that certainty. Their decision should feel easy because the concern of doing nothing or going with someone else is way outweighs it, okay? So practice rephrasing intellectual questions into emotional ones. Instead of saying, what do you think about the solution? Try, do you feel the solution would make your life easier, right? That's an emotional question versus a logical one, versus an intellectual one. Use the prospect's own language. If they say, look, I just want peace of mind, incorporate that into your questions. I mean, if you could do this, do you feel like you would actually have peace of mind? I guess how would that peace of mind actually feel? Be mindful of their resistance. If your prospect starts to pull back, look for ways to gently guide them back on track into the emotional flow without being pushy. You don't need to use heavily emotional language to get them emotional. That's the key here. As we wrap up today's episode, okay, this was advanced stuff. Let's lock into the core insight we've explored. In sales, your language is your most powerful tool for creating emotional momentum. The words you choose, the questions you ask, the imagery you evoke in your prospect's mind can completely change how someone experiences your offer and whether they decide to move forward. Here is what it all comes down to: shifting from intellectual to emotional communication, okay? This is not just about presenting the facts of what your thing does, and it's not just about presenting them with the most emotional language possible. It's about actually understanding how humans feel emotions and how imagery and imagination can create emotion without emotional words themselves. And intentionality is powerful in getting that done. This is the key of really understanding. And all the stuff we teach involves a dynamic emotional flow in a conversation to really apply this. But the real power is in understanding how concepts like motions between images in the brain creates emotion, but it does it covertly, not overtly. Because when you incorporate techniques like this consistently, you're not simply selling a product or a service. You are actively creating a journey in the prospect's mind, helping them travel to where they are right now to where they want to be, okay? Thinking about the examples I gave, a luxury watch isn't just an accessory. It's a symbol of recognition. Life insurance isn't just a policy. It's the comfort of knowing your family is secure. Think about what it is you are actually selling. What emotion are you actually selling? And understand that these techniques are about guiding prospects through an emotional translation of what your offer truly means to them. For those of you listening to this I'm not just trying to do this in theory. These are real tools that we train on to help you create real emotional alignment with your prospects. Your ability to guide a conversation in that emotional frame, to move someone from, yeah, I'm not sure, to this feels right. I'm not sure. Yeah, it could be good. Let me think about it. Let me run my numbers. To this feels right is the biggest edge in sales. And if you want to master this, it's going to take practice, and you will likely need some guidance along the way. You likely will. So pay attention to your prospect's language. Experiment with creating mental scenarios and using questions so they verbalize it in ways that resonate to who your avatar is. Focus on shifting from intellectual resistance to emotional alignment. This episode was dense, so come back to it, listen again, and keep sharpening your approach. If you are ready to take these concepts further, because we're just touching on the surface on it in this form here, to see how you can it can transform your sales process, Text CLOSE, CLOSE, to 33777, and we'll see if you qualify to join with the salespeople who are doing this actively. Whether you're working on your own, you're leading a team, whatever you're doing, we can help you apply these ideas, these concepts, these techniques and tactics to close more sales and build deeper connections with your customers. I'm Ian Ross. This has been the Close More Sales Podcast.